Welcome to the Bonsai Time Podcast. Today on the podcast we are doing something a little bit different. We are actually going to travel back in time almost exactly 2 years to May of 2020 when I first had the idea to start a bonsai podcast. So at that time I hosted a Zoom call with Bello and Julian Tsai, two other apprentices in the bonsai world. Andy was starting out as an apprentice and intern at the beginning phases of working at the National Bonsai and Penjing Museum in Washington, D.C. Julian at the time had just come back from his apprenticeship in Japan where he was working at Kouka-en Bonsai Nursery. And Julian is now based out of the LA, San Diego area, and Andy is still in D.C. and he is now the assistant curator of that collection. So enjoy the interview. You get to hear about bonsai around the world from the apprentice perspective. And at the end of the interview, the last half, there's a new segment which I have never released before. And that segment is one where I collected submissions from my readers for trees that they were wanting advice on. And these trees, Andy and Julian and I discussed, and we laid out the path that we would take if that tree was in our collection and some different styling ideas and ideas for health of these trees. So hope you enjoy that and hope you use that section to practice your own thinking about bonsai. And if you're listening to this in the podcast version, I'll have pictures of all the trees that we discussed in the show notes so you can practice your own thinking by going there or by going to the video version. We hope to do more content like this in the future. So if you have a tree that you would like us to discuss in the future, you can submit it at our website, bonsaitimepodcast.com. Thank you.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep.
How you doing, man?
Pretty good. How are you?
Doing well, just chilling.
Hey, what's up?
What up,
Hey,
Julian? How you doing, man?
I'm doing all right. How about you?
Good. I was just napping. Been super busy over at the museum, just keeping up all the spring work. In DC, we're already pretty much feels like summer today, so just chasing back a lot of growth.
Okay. Is the museum open to the public as well, or are you just doing maintenance?
No, it's just open to essential employees. So not even all of our gardeners at the Arboretum are there. I was driving around the grounds and everything is just very overgrown right now.
I think that's the same deal at our local collection here in Southern California. I think the curator and some staff still manage it, but it has been open for the past few months.
Mm. Well, hopefully things will open up soon. But at least we can talk about bonsai while we wait.
Always.
So, Julian, without looking at the show notes, do you want to pick a random number 1 through 8?
Sure. 5.
Okay. What is your biggest bonsai pet peeve?
Huh.
Oh, actually,
it's hard to think of off the top of my head.
Hold that thought. You can think about it because we should probably introduce ourselves. I kind of forgot about that.
Uh-huh.
People might watch without knowing who all of us are.
Yeah.
So you can go first, Julian, I guess.
So welcome for those who don't know me. I'm Julian Tsai. I came back from a brief stint about the past 1.5 to 2 years. I spent in Osaka Prefecture, Japan, where I pursued an apprenticeship at Kouka-en. Before that, I've been on and off involved in bonsai, starting from Southern California, and I kind of got more invested. And I think it was in 2017. I was working out in the Chicago areas, and I met up with the owner out there at the Hidden Gardens, Jeff Schultz, and I also at that time I met Owen Reich, who was a former apprentice at Kouka-en, and I kind of got the ball rolling from there. to pursue bonsai kind of as a interest and passion and a potential career path for me. But nothing too much has been going on right now. I've been stuck at home with quarantine and whatnot. But just looking at the future in a positive note, and we'll see how things go.
That was well said, Julian. I guess I'm my name is Andy or Andrew Bello. I go by both. I was the intern or apprentice, as I guess you could say. It's the first curator's apprentice at the National Bonsai and Penjing Museum. I'm currently working there still, and I'm going to transition into the assistant curator position there, working with the curator, Michael James, who has been doing a really great job of just keeping the health of the collection looking amazing and really keeping the artists, works moving towards their vision, but also considering the health of the trees, which always is a constant conversation over collections, I know, but he's been doing a great job, and I love working there. And I guess me starting into bonsai, I grew up in Illinois near the Chicago collection, in Glenview, Illinois is where I lived. And then I moved to Arizona for school. Didn't really do bonsai much. My friends were growing some sequoias in their room, like my friends were had grow lights, and they had some trees inside. Didn't last very long. They all died. And I was like, dang, that's pretty cool. And I kind of got a little bit more interested. Moved to Oregon to breed koi and goldfish for this company. And then that kind of introduced me to Japanese koi breeding and culture. And through that, I started getting into bonsai more. Then I worked at a bonsai nursery, and it was more like a field-grown stuff. Some collected shore pines, collected Port Orford cedars. This was on the Bandon it's Bandon, Oregon, which is on the coast. So it's a beautiful place. If you can, I definitely recommend getting out there. It's called Driftwood Bonsai. Just the whole coast from California up is just amazing.
Where along the Oregon coast is that?
That's like south central. If you know, it's like south of Newport.
Okay.
Or you know where Coos Bay is?
I don't know where Coos Bay is, but I know where Newport is.
It's south of Newport, about an hour and a half.
Okay.
It's really beautiful. The shore pines are just like so windswept, and there's beautiful state park over there, and so that's where a lot of my inspiration comes from, I guess. That nursery I worked at and that environment around there, it kind of opened the door for me to I would go 5 days a month and just wire trees in the ground, wire style raw material. Like, he would pretty much let me choose anything I wanted, and he's like, okay, here's like 5 plants for your day. Here's a tree for each day you're here. And then also like some work that I need help with. And I would just kind of really crappily wire things. And then he would just be like, oh, this is like, a better way to do this. And he would kind of critique my work without very hands off until after I had done it. So that was kind of cool, because it let me kind of learn from making mistakes, which is very important in bonsai, as we all doing bonsai know very well.
Yeah, that's a pretty good way of learning. I think maybe all three of us have had similar experiences in that kind of informal volunteering for a nursery. Like, I volunteered for Dan Robinson at a London, also about like once every week for 2 or 3 years while I was in undergrad here. And Julian, did you volunteer at Hidden Gardens in Chicago? Was that right?
Yeah, I was only out there for about 3 months. So I did some work for Jeff and helped at the Chicago bonsai show, Midwest bonsai show. Out in Southern California, before I went to Japan, I did do some volunteering out with Huntington Gardens, which is our big collection out here. So I'd say before the apprenticeship, bonsai for me was largely, a self-pursued interest and hobby, just trying to teach myself, practice on, material I had access to, or people who had trees. So it was like that for, I'd say, good 4 or 5 years or so before I really could start accelerating, getting nicer stuff to work on, and furthering the practice in bonsai.
Gotcha. Yeah. Just to introduce myself real quick, I'm Ryan, and I've been doing bonsai since I was 8. But I always tell people those first 10 years I kind of wasted because I was growing the trees indoors, and I had like one bonsai book by Colin Lewis that I would always like kill a tree, go back to the book, flip through it, reread it, and then a tree. So it wasn't until I came out to Seattle and started like really immersing myself in all of the mountains and the nature around, and then I stumbled on Dan Robinson's that I started getting more intense bonsai, like seeing kind of the really serious people and what they could do made me more motivated to try to like spend more time and energy. But before I was just kind of like very fascinated, but I didn't know the whole process of getting to one of those like top tier trees. Yeah. Okay. Have you thought of your pet peeve for bonsai yet?
Yeah, I have thought of one, and I guess this is kind of like maybe other people share the same sentiment for those who are current professionals or trying to be. And I feel a lot of the kind of bonsai culture and mindset, especially in the U.S., is people want like really accelerated results. They want the work to look good now, the tree to advance to a refinement stage now. But developing bonsai is a very long-term and invested endeavor. And in a tree's life, there's different stages of development where you're growing different aspects of the tree, the body, root spread, trunk, branches, and so forth. And if you try to like accelerate that process and you want such a high degree of refinement early on in the tree's development, more often than not, you take shortcuts, compromising on the tree's structure, the quality that in the long term hinders the growth. So I guess a pet peeve of mine is sometimes if people want me to take something that's really not at the stage to be worked on for health or other reasons, but they expect really refined result that you see in some of the work in Japan. But kind of what other people told me is that bonsai, you could say it's like maybe 60-70% the tree and 30-40% the artist. So you do have some control to exert over the result and the direction of the tree. But at the same point, you should kind of use the tree as a guideline to see what you can and can't do. Take the good and bad attributes, understand the health and the horticulture to bring out a sustainable result. I kind of went into that a bit deeper, but I guess a pet peeve is I don't like people expecting instant bonsai, because there's no such thing.
It's kind of interesting because I feel like in one sense, training in Japan, like the nursery culture, would you say kind of like prioritizes speed of development? Like they might try to grow from seed as fast as they can and things like that. But on the other hand, they know everything there is to know about the horticulture, basically, to know like how to do that safely, I guess, how to push trees to their limit without killing them or things like that.
Yeah.
Andy, do you have any pet peeves yet?
Kind of, I guess, going off of what Julian said, that's like, I've always thought about that too. And from my perspective, working in a collection, it's like, people come and see, John Naka's Goshen, and they're like, oh my gosh, like, how do I have one of those? And I'm like, they just think it is very insane. We don't have a lot of educational stuff around. We do have things kind of in and out depending, but it's like, I'm not there to tell them, people think that bonsai is an instant thing and they don't like realize that it's like the top tier of like what you're getting to. And like in any of the collections, it's like, it's cool for people to see, but I think it'd be cool a little bit to have, like, I know Aaron Packard for a little bit when he was over at the National Collection did a kind of step-by-step like exhibit of like, this is creating, because it's called Becoming a Bonsai. And I thought that was cool, like for people to kind of understand that process, especially like thinking outside of, getting more people into bonsai. They got to really establish that first, because they're going to get really out of it really quick. And I mean, also going off that, like, that kind of is my pet peeve too, I guess. One of my big ones, I guess, was what Julian said. Going off of that also is like, if you're doing bonsai for the final result, you probably should not be just buying nice trees that are already completed and not trying to develop your own. Because that's the whole fun of bonsai for a lot of us, I think, is that process part. I mean, it is a process art, and there really is never a finish. I mean, it could get in a collection, but then the symmetry forms, and then you got to remove things, and it's always changing. So
Mm-hmm.
that, and then my other personal pet peeve, I guess, would be like just people being so closed-minded to other like styles and being like very like almost overly loyal to different artists. And like I can see my son's kind of like, I very much like Dan, and I came and spent time with Dan last year up in Bremerton, and I learned a ton from him. And it's really interesting, like, to hear what other people on the East Coast say about, Dan and his styling and what people have said about that. And it's like, why can't you just appreciate his art for what it is? Or why can't you appreciate Nick Len's art for what it is? It's not, you can not like it, but that doesn't mean it's wrong. And that's kind of my thing. It's like, just because someone does something different, people are like, oh, that's like not bonsai. But you're like, well, isn't bonsai an art? And how is there a right or a wrong in art? That's kind of my biggest pet peeve.
Mm. Yeah, I don't know if it's true in other countries. Maybe Julian can comment on this since he worked in Japan for a while. But it does seem like, at least online, the American bonsai community, by and large, has like a strict style preferences. Like they like trees that look like every tree in Japan, and kind of a dome and all that, and less deadwood, or maybe certain types of deadwood. Like they don't like softwood, hollows on maples, for example. Or at least some people I've met don't like that. I forget where I was going with this, but definitely seems like that is a big topic of conversation in bonsai. Julian, do you think that the Japanese bonsai community is like more or less open-minded than the American bonsai community?
Well, I guess you have to look at it in this way. I would say, in the U.S., the bonsai community is primarily a hobbyist driven community from its, interest points and, the members who comprise it. But, for nurseries in Japan, it's a business. So the kind of motivation and criteria is different. So when professionals generally work and make on trees, to some extent there's some, artistic freedom, or, depending on how, financially secure that nursery is and its relationships with customers, the owner or artist, may have some more flexibility in doing what they want to do. But ultimately, you make trees that appeal to the customer base, or trees that are going to do well in the large shows in Japan. So there's the Kokufu, which is well known out in Tokyo. It's the arguably the best bonsai show, as some people say. Out closer to where I was, they have the Taikon 10, which is out in Osaka. And the quality level of that show is not as high as the Kokufu, but the interesting thing about that show is you see a lot of more diversity in species and some kind of quirky trees here and there. So maybe the consistency and quality level is not as high, but I would say the variety and interest is a lot more. And of course, there's the professional show, which is called the Sakafu. So, going back to that question, at least as far as what I've seen, you can argue there's like this Japanese aesthetic in terms of like proportion and cleanliness and how they create their trees. But I'd say from artist to artist, there's definitely some nuance. Say, for example, in my nursery, traditionally, in the past, my Waikata's preference in styling and selling trees is to have extremely clean, sharp lines and designing the foliage paths, because he knew that's what would sell well for his customers. And especially for nowadays in Japan, we get a lot of buyers and brokers, mainly from China and some from Europe. Those kind of trees just tend to sell well. But if you look at some nurseries, of a famous one, maybe Shinji Suzuki's, a lot of his foliage pads are designed with intentions to be a lot softer in image, for arguably a bit more naturalistic. I think these are small differences in nuances in the overall look, but I would say the core of bonsai in terms of design and technique, it's still quite similar amongst all other professionals. And in Japan, and this might be a cultural thing, there's not so much in terms of, individuality, standing apart from others in terms of, the design and uniqueness, but more of, taking a very nuanced approach. And, the small, subtle changes and aspects of something that give it, that's something you can appreciate and gives it a nice quality without detracting or taking away from the initial intention. So that's probably more in line with some cultural values. But I would say in U.S. we do see a lot of variety and interest in different types of bonsai styles and kind of how the hobbyist would like to practice it. I would say in Japan it's more uniform, but you do see differences among some professionals.
Mm-hmm. You'd probably have to spend a lot of time, and if you were to tour a bunch of different nurseries in Japan, you'd probably have to spend a lot of time studying the trees in each one to notice those differences, it seems like. But it would be cool to do.
Yeah.
That was like really well said, I feel like, about how Julian put it. And I mean, I can even notice like too, like I read through all the Kogafu books. We have them all at the museum, and I just flip through them at my lunch break. Usually I just kind of like, and just whatever, and looking at all those, like you can really see those like little nuances. Especially I feel like a good example was Shinji Suzuki. Like his pad, I don't know if you saw the Taikon 10 prize, the Prime Minister Award Juniper he had on there.
Yeah.
Well, that tree, wow.
Like I was about like the last Taikon 10.
Yeah, with the sun in the background.
Oh yeah, I was there.
Yeah, that one, I would to see that tree in person. I'm pretty envious of you, because I saw some videos of that, and like you can see like that. I like that little nuance that he has, but then I also like see your styling that you're doing, at the nursery you're with, and it is beautiful in its own way, where it is a lot sharper. And I think that, yeah, and then you like we're talking about the U.S. It's with the hobbyists, you can just do whatever the hell you want, because it's. Not people aren't trying to sell for that, and it's like more. I feel like more raw materials being said. And people aren't really willing to spend that much money on a tree that is, been cared for that long, because the value in that is, I feel like a lot of times undersold. Even in Japan, I could be wrong, but I feel like that is here at least too.
Mm-hmm.
That is probably true, and I think maybe or I don't know if it's just us because we're younger, but. Andy, you mentioned this earlier, that you were saying you take more joy in creating something new than like getting a tree that's already established. And I feel like that's my mindset too. Like I would rather go collect a tree myself and watch it evolve and buy one that someone else has collected and already styled, and then you're just kind of making more minor modifications. If in my mind I don't have like a dramatic change for the tree, I don't think I would invest money in it. But yeah.
I wish I could. I wish I had.
That's also true. It's also a matter of not having money. Yeah. Andy, do you want to pick a number from 1 through 8?
Let's do 7.
Okay. And we're going to try to keep this one a little shorter so that we can go get to the tree section at the end.
Yeah.
What is your best advice for newcomers to bonsai?
Oh, that's like, I'd probably, just to keep it short, would probably be just don't get bummed out when you kill your first tree or your second one or your third one or hundreds of them, really. I mean, if you kill them, or if you lose branches or cut the wrong one off, if it's still alive, try to grow something else and, take it as a limb. I think John Naka, when he used to break a branch, said it wasn't supposed to be there anyway. So, it's, you kind of just got to not be too hard on yourself when you kill things. I kill trees still, luckily at home, not at work. So, that you're only going to get better by practicing and read horticulture, like get your horticulture down and learn the basics of bonsai. And then if you want to do weird stuff and fun stuff like Nick Lenz or Dan was doing, then I think it's nice to, you can do that whenever, but I think it's kind of nice to have the more traditional approach so you understand the basics and can care for the plant. And a healthy plant that's unstyled and is way more beautiful than a dead styled plant. So that's my advice.
Yeah, that's probably true. Do you have any advice for newcomers, Julian?
Yeah, I would say, the biggest thing is, to find trees and find people in person. Bonsai is, really an art and practice that you learn by doing and seeing. and it's not so much by, there's a lot of great resources, on the internet now, and a lot of different professionals providing, various educational content and lessons and programs. And, those are all really helpful, but, bonsai, you got to see the trees and you got to put it into practice to really learn and get into it. So as a newcomer, I would definitely, seek out a local club, local nursery. A lot of times they even have like free resources to help you learn. It's a good way to start out than necessarily trying to do everything yourselves, or rely on purely written or visual education from videos or online, which are good but have their limitations.
Yeah, I think that's a good piece of advice. Like none of us three at least would be where we are in bonsai without having these networks of people that are more experienced to ask for advice from and learn from in person, especially. I have a question for both of you, maybe more for Andy, because towards the end of this summer, I'm going to be moving across the country. So I have like a especially keen interest right now in how bonsai is done in different parts of the world. Because I feel like, here in Seattle, we don't have to overwinter our trees very much. So every part of the world like has some local peculiarities, about how they do bonsai. So Andy, is there any major differences you notice, for example, in how the clubs work from where you were in Oregon and in DC, or in how you have to take care of your trees? And also, as part of this question, are there any species that you wanted to take from Oregon but had to leave behind because of the differences in climate?
Yeah, so I guess the first part of that about being in different, what I've experienced, at least from Oregon to DC, is there's strong, I lived in Eugene, Oregon. I know Portland is like an epicenter for bonsai, like really is just killing it out there. Like mad shout out to everyone out there that's like part of that community and supporting it and doing their thing. All those professionals are just really good that live there. And Eugene's a lot smaller. It was a town of about 1,800, or I think it was small. I mean, mostly a university town. The club, I was definitely like one of the younger people in there for sure, and a lot of good advice from everyone, and it felt more of like a family out here. I haven't really joined any societies yet. Well, I was about to join one, Brookside Bonsai Society, but then coronavirus happened, so that no meetings right now. But the one thing I've noticed out here from talking to people that have been here longer than me, and kind of my thing with DC, is it's a very transient place. People come work for the government and then maybe go on detail to work for the government in a different state. So I feel like the community around the collection itself could be a lot stronger. And I think that people there's been some, I'm trying to say this in a way that won't get me blasted in the comments or something, but like there's people that, people kind of don't, maybe they clashed a little bit and caused some divides between the clubs. And I could see that as an outsider, but I'm trying to start a study group and kind of get a more community kind of built around myself and and just kind of do bonsai with friends. I mean, that's the main, for me, bonsai, being a curator, like trying to be a curator one day of a collection, is I really value the collaborative effort of what bonsai can be if it's collaborative. Like you can do it by yourself if you want, but I think it's really fun to have different inputs into one tree and work through designs. And that's something that I don't feel like I have here as much. And I think that's just because I'm newer here. And I mean, going to the tree, yeah, I think that's the biggest difference probably. It's just a big city compared to a small town is the difference for me. And then going to the trees, I was just talking about that this morning while I was over at the collection with one of the guys I'm working with. And I was talking about how bad I want mountain hemlocks, because they're just so, man, that foliage is just amazing. And I would love to have that. And maybe I'm sure people have grown them here for a long time. And that might be something I also get told is like, you can grow them here. But I'm not willing to risk a beautiful tree like what the mountain hemlocks I've seen are like to try to grow it here. I know Nature's Way, they have them up there in Harrisburg, but that's 2 hours north of me. And just that little bit of difference. DC is humid and hot, and the winters are not that cold, so they don't last very long here. Larch as well would be another species I wish I could have.
Yeah, I'm in that scenario right now because I have mountain hemlocks, western hemlocks, and subalpine fir. This is like a western hemlock, mountain hemlock hybrid, and they grow very densely, so nicely on their own. Like you just have to, once you set the basic branch structure, they'll kind of fill in for you, and then you just go in and pick the ones that you don't want. But especially since a lot of those were ones that I collected, they're my favorite trees out of all of the ones here. And I asked some people online. I haven't found anyone in Ohio that grows mountain hemlock yet, but people told me it should be possible. So what I might do is I might leave my bigger ones here with Dan, and then like bring some of the younger ones and just see if they can grow there with some shade cloth or something.
Yeah, definitely give it some time before you bring the big ones, because I know larch could survive in DC for about 5 years, and then they just slowly putter out. So don't get too excited like too fast with it is my recommendation for that.
Gotcha. Yeah, it's kind of interesting because it might also have a lot to do with your microclimate. I heard there was something, I think Dan told me about someone that was growing larch in a kind of warmer place. And what they would do is they would put the larch on the ground every night, which somehow made them experience cooler temperatures, get more dew compared to if they were higher up. So maybe there are little things like that I could do, but we'll find out. Yeah.
Your back's going to hurt if you're doing that with the big ones every day.
Yeah, I might just leave them on the ground forever. Yeah. Julian, did you notice anything different? I also feel like one thing I'm thinking about as I'm considering moving from Seattle to Columbus is like have clubs do things differently, and I could try to take some ideas from this club from the Seattle club to the Columbus club or something. Julian, do you know anything about what the LA club is up to? I know that they're doing a lot more YouTube content recently.
The LA's kind of has its own, in some ways, like segregated bonsai scene from the rest of the U.S. It's kind of the quote unquote original bonsai scene, at least in the U.S. for when bonsai started to get momentum in stateside. So because of that, we have a lot of really old clubs here that have a lot of history and some older members and some cool things going on about it. But on that same side, it's kind of like both a plus and I guess a negative that some people are there kind of more content in just doing bonsai however they enjoy it or however they see it, and maybe the clubs aren't as so receptive to learning more or doing some change. I'll say recently you have seen some more stuff at least on social media. We have the California Bonsai Society, which is led by Bob Pressler, and he's been making a large effort of recent years to bring in artists outside Southern California and even internationally to kind of give some more exposure and diversity in the community. And you see, we have if a Doyle Saito, and he runs they do Facebook live streaming for the Daiichi Bonsai Club. So sometimes you might see that on Facebook. And another guy, Tom Wall, he's at Kouka-en Bonsai Club, which is a local here to the LA Arboretum. And he's recently been making an effort to get out a lot of videos, of the local club members and different artists to showcase, what bonsai is around this area. So I would say, they're all doing a pretty good job and kind of trying to progress the community more. Since the timing's pretty bad since I've gotten back. It's not a good time to get involved. But before I went to Japan, I was in school. I was in college, so I didn't have too much time to be really active in the club scene. So I would just attend some meetings here and there, all the local shows. But I do hope now that I've been back, hopefully in the future when things the timing is better to get to know the clubs a bit better, involve myself in the community. But what was the question?
Oh, I was just wondering some of the things that the LA club is up to. That's a pretty good list of what the activity is like in the area. It's kind of interesting because did you come back right before COVID came?
So I came back about like end of January. So that's when, COVID
started. Yeah, like 1 month before the lockdowns.
Yeah. I thought, at the time I left Japan, that's when there's like a kind of lot of the concerns and scare going on in Asia, because they have there was in 2002 there was a SARS, which is the same type of virus as COVID-19, but different strain, and that was a really big deal back then. And some countries had a bad experience and kind of memory with it. So when they saw COVID, some companies really jumped into gear because they've had already the experience in the past and were very cautious and worried. So when I saw that happening there, I was like, oh, I'm escaping from the virus in a sense, and I just came here to the U.S. and pretty much the same thing is going on.
Yeah. So were you trying to escape on purpose? I mean, did COVID speed up your timeline for leaving?
No, that was just purely coincidental. The whole COVID situation happening. I already intended to come back stateside around this time.
Okay. Lucky timing then, or unlucky in some ways. Lucky in others. At least you didn't have to quarantine when you got back.
Yeah.
Have you gotten to do any hikes since you came back, Julian?
Yeah, I've done a little bit of hiking around I guess the SoCal high mountains, the maybe around like 8,000 feet or so. I just came back from Joshua Tree like a few days ago. So that was pretty nice.
And kind of planning in my head when I go to Ohio for grad school, I want to come back to the West like at least once a year to do a big hike or something like that. So we'll see how that goes.
You've done like a lot of hiking around Pacific Northwest, right?
Yeah, I've kind of fallen in love with it. Actually, after we're done here, I'm going to go camping today. So pretty good social distancing,
Yeah, the trails and the national parks out there are really nice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I look forward to exploring new places around Ohio, though. I'm already like thinking in my head, okay, where can I get all the yamadori? Like maybe on people's farms, go to Michigan. I don't know.
National forests out there.
Yeah, well, out here it's pretty easy to find. We have all those logging roads.
Oh yeah.
They make a nice road for you to use, and then they leave it behind after they're done logging. So, but I haven't figured it out in Ohio yet. I'll probably explore next spring and see what there is. So I think we're going to move on to the trees that were submitted.
Okay, sounds good.
Cool.
Yeah. Let's see. So I mentioned I was thinking for the trees that were submitted, we could all like rotate 1, 2, 3, giving our advice. I'll read off what they sent in, and you guys can give your advice or how you might style it. And if we have like alternative perspectives, feel free to chime in with that.
Yeah, for sure.
So Julian, I'll have you do the first one. The first one is from Christopher. He sent a Eastern Red Cedar, which is Juniperus virginiana, and it's a Yamadori. Mm-hmm. The tree grew in a low light environment and has a slender primary trunk with minor movement. There are 3 low branches, not quite low or big enough to be considered trunks, and only 1/3 viable outside of the gin and sacrifice branch. Minimal foliage. Oh, there's minimal foliage on interior branches and many weeping branches. So how would you style this Yamadori, Julian?
So I'll kind of give 2 lines of advice here. One's in terms of aesthetic and styling, and one in terms of horticulture and health. From the picture and, from what Christopher says, the tree does appear to be on the weaker side. So a lot of that, interior, yellowish brown growth, I'm not sure, how healthy that is, or if it can be reliably considered a part of the design, if it might drop in the future. So, from the health and horticulture side, I would say the first step is, one, remove all that weak or dead growth. Get the tree strong, feed it, give it a lot of exposure to sunlight in the interior. And, when you get strong, healthy interior growth, that's usable for styling. Then you could, consider, progressing further, kind of along the lines, I think Andy said that, it's better to have, an unstyled, but, full and healthy tree than a styled tree that's dead. But, assuming the branches are viable and ready to be wired, as far as stylistically, you do have, several, elegant trunks, and those low branches can be wired into place and utilized as trunks. So I would actually, potentially keep all the trunks on this tree, and you wire them together in, more graceful, feminine, forest kind of clump appearance. You're out in the Pacific Northwest, Ryan, so you've seen a lot of, the hemlock clumps, and, they have fir and spruce. Michael Hagedorn, he has, I really like, one. What he does with his hemlocks and whatnot. But I feel for this tree in particular, and from what I know, Juniper virginiana has really kind of fine, soft foliage. So, it might be good going for a delicate feel. So, a soft clumper forest where you use all the trunks in this design, as opposed to, a single trunk and laying out pads and branches.
Yeah, I like that idea. I was thinking originally of kind of like a Walter Paul, like candelabra style, but I think those two can be, since all the trunks come from down low, it definitely could be a pretty convincing clump style. One thing I also noticed is, I'll throw up an image for the viewers, but there's a back bud along the trunk pretty low down. So I feel like this species probably would back bud readily if everywhere was as healthy as like the exterior growth.
Yeah, that's definitely a good sign to see.
Mm-hmm. Let's see. Andy, do you want to take Anastasia's rose bush? She said,
yeah, sure.
I'm a beginner. I like the trunk and the root which is sticking out, but I'm confused as to which branch should be the apex and how it should be wired.
Okay. Well, yeah, looking at the picture, like kind of the same as Julian, I'll do like kind of just quick horticulture, I guess, and then designing. I would probably, with this, seeing it, it's pretty like sparse. Like there's not much foliage, at least this time of this photo was taken. So I would probably just like let it, that's kind of what I'm doing with a lot of my material, is just like letting a lot of it kind of grow out and get super strong and just like be insanely vigorous, and then making selections based on there. Cause then you have more options, depending on the species. You don't want to let too many things grow out, cause then you'll get a bunch of ugly scarring. But roses, I mean, it's more of a shrub anyways. And I think that I would go with kind of some more, it's not going to be a smooth bark beech, it's a rose. So you can probably get away with a little bit more like scarring and stuff. And I think with what it is now, there kind of is a small apex kind of forming there. If you cut back that middle long branch into that inner bud, but I would probably just leave it a little bit longer and just let it grow. I do like the trunk. It's pretty nice. And I think it's already kind of looking like I'd make like a kind of, just kind of like a slight windswept like style, maybe, just with how it's going in that picture. But I would probably just grow, if it was my tree, I would grow it out a little bit longer and get more options, because it looks like there's not many secondary branches from the photo.
Yeah, that seems like good advice. It looks like there's a lot of new growth in response to a recent pruning. So give it a year or two and it should fill in and give you more options. Yeah,
they grow pretty fast. I mean, it's a rose, so it'll be fun to work with, I think, though.
Yeah. So my friend Marius from Instagram sent in a few different trees. He started with a multi-trunk quince. Looks like it's kind of a clump style. I might be tempted to try to take some cuttings and make like a shohin forest out of it. Because, I don't know, do you guys think that quince is kind of slow to thicken a trunk?
I think when they're younger, at least from what I've seen, the quince can grow pretty fast. But the older quinces tend to be a little more slow growing.
Okay. I have never worked with a quince, so I'm not totally sure.
Yeah, I think I agree with Julian. I've seen at least even like if you even look at an old quince though and look at the branches that are, the fresher shoots, they do tend to thicken quite fast if you let them run. So but I think, I don't know what variety of quince this is, but I agree with your idea. I think it'd be kind of cool to make a shohin or a chuhin forest with it over time would be nice. Kind of grow some separately, maybe get some a little bit bigger, and then go from there. I think that would be kind of cool.
Yeah. I guess we'll talk more about forest later, maybe. But Julian, do you want to take Marius's Shimpaku?
Yeah, sure. So it's kind of hard to see what's going on with the trunk in terms of the movement since the foliage is covering most of it. But from the base, I can see it has been twisted in the past. One thing I do see though, it doesn't have any deadwood features, and what you should do very early on in the development of junipers is start cutting line for the shadi, the deadwood. With junipers, we really want to accentuate movement of the trunk, visual interest, and develop that contrast between the live vein and the dead vein. With developing shadi on junipers, if you ever see those really cool bladed deadwood features, especially for example, if you've seen the junipers in Taiwan, most of those are all field grown, except they look very convincing as a yamadori. And what they do essentially is you cut a shadi line, following the movement in the trunk, and every year that cambium that you cut is gonna recallus and roll over that cut you made, and you'll recut it every single year. So you'll kind of get this layer of callus reforming, and you strip it back. And what this does, it creates a very natural layered, terraced wood grain appearance. And since you are recutting the shadi every year, you're encouraging the ends that are left alone. It'll continuously grow wider and wider and wider as you spread out the deadwood feature. So as the tree ages, you get a non-uniform a growth of the trunk, which develops a lot of visual interest. If you were to let this just grow freely without any work on the deadwood in the trunk, you just get a solid cylindrical trunk for most of its life, which lacks some of those qualities you would like to see for a juniper, at least what it lends well to. That's something I would do right now. Aside from that, as far as the branch structure, it's really hard to see what's going on in this photo. But junipers, it's a lot of maintenance work in terms of removing weak growth or undesirable shoots, going in bad orientations, crotch growth, and retaining healthy branches, preferably with back buds, to create your structure. So right now it's kind of like there's a lot going on, but it can be cleaned up and reduced.
So for creating the shari, I'll try to find a picture of the Taiwan junipers you mentioned to put up for the viewers. But creating the shari, would you just take like an X-Acto knife and kind of cut?
Yeah, you can. Well, a lot of times you can use a Sharpie or chalk to kind of draw the shadi line that you intend to do. Just one thing to note is you don't want to go across the grain or avoid girdling the tree completely.
Right.
You do have some leeway in terms of not necessarily fully crossing the grain. You could going along with the grain. You can cut the shadi, crossing it a little, because a healthy tree, it's still going to carry some of the water nutrients to the xylem, the wood underneath. And when you make shadi, you're just cutting the cambium. So there's some kind of tolerance in how hard you can work it and create deadwood features. But generally, you want to go with the grain of the wood. So take like a chalk or a Sharpie, draw the line you want to do, and just get an X-Acto knife and just cut out a strip and peel off the bark.
Okay. Hopefully he can try that out. I think he does have some pretty developed trees, so he might already be familiar with that technique, but I'm sure a lot of people out there aren't. And the last one from Marius, he didn't really give the species.
Yeah, you can't tell what it is. I was thinking it's like a Zelkova or a Chinese elm. I can't zoom in on how I'm looking at it. I can't zoom, and I can't tell.
Well,
maybe
some kind of
crabapple?
deciduous broadleaf. Yeah, I was thinking crabapple could be too. So, Andy, what would you do with this mystery?
I'm trying to see where those branches go.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I would probably do. I mean, it depends what you're trying to do with, I guess, in bonsai. Like Dan, he's trying to make ancient trees, and some people make trees that are more familiar to them. This one, I would probably style a little bit more, either shorten it and try to make like a shohin out of it because the trunk doesn't look super thick, and make like a smaller, like kind of like a shorter tree. I would probably shorten it. I mean, overall, just because there's kind of some long shoots, or you can do more of kind of like a formal upright younger tree too. There's nothing wrong with representing. Bonsai can be like at any age you can be representing. It's just, I know Michael Hagedorn, I think it was in his new book, if you haven't read it, it's amazing. He was talking about how we really focus on those big trees and bulky trees, but like especially in like Kokofu, I know he said he compared it to steak and potatoes kind of dinner and not as much vegetables. And I think that it's also, I agree with that. And I think it's kind of nice to do kind of maybe something that if you grew up somewhere where like in the city, like in DC, there's a lot of trees that kind of look similar to that, where they're more upright, and maybe kind of fun to mess around with more like an urban styling landscape tree. That's probably what I would do. That's just my kind of weird, quirky opinion, I guess.
It's kind of interesting. I feel like what I've noticed is a lot of the more seasoned bonsai professionals, they do prefer trees that look older. But then a lot of beginners, maybe just by the nature of material that they're starting with, their trees end up looking like a representation of a younger tree in the nature. Yeah. Okay.
But style. Yeah, I think that's the best I have for that one right now.
Kevin has some 2 Japanese hornbeams and 1 Korean fir. And these kind of fall in the same category. I feel like you could cut them short and make like a small shohin style Zelkova, or actually they're hornbeams, so not Zelkova, but you could make a shohin size, or you could try to grow their trunks really fat with sacrifice branches. And I feel like I've heard that hornbeams are slow to thicken their trunks maybe, so maybe that's not such an option. But one thing that I always think about for trees that are kind of tall and straight and don't have much taper is I think that those are more reminiscent of like a natural deciduous forest. So if he were to plant these 2 trees together and maybe take some more cuttings. I'm in a forest phase because Vanis visited our club here right before COVID. It was like January or December or something. And so he talked about how to make a good forest. And so I've been I've been thinking more about how to do that recently, I guess.
I think that's a good idea. I agree. I think that making, especially with, younger material, making like, and if it's lacking taper and stuff like that, I think it is a little bit easier maybe like to do a forest, and then, or maybe sometimes, just throw it in the ground if you really want to.
That is always an option.
Throw it in the ground and let it grow big and get more branching and maintain it while it's in the ground. Don't forget about it, because sometimes it'll end up with a big landscape tree that you can't really get out, but depending on your soil and how you can.
Yeah, if you ever get a tree that's like just mysteriously losing its health, or everything dies except for one branch, you don't know what to do with it, just stick it in the ground for a few years if you can do that, and maybe it'll give you some new options.
I definitely agree with the idea with a forest. with a forest, not that it's not important, but you're less focused in terms of, the individual quality of every tree and more of the composition. So, what is the scale of the forest? The image you're trying to convey. How do you portray the depth with, thicker trees and thinner trees? More in the front, more in the back. That composition becomes, and placement becomes a lot more valuable. So you can take, younger material and, maybe if you do some air layers and cuttings, you'll have, varied size and shapes, where you create a nice composition. In a forest setting, having, straight trunks or very, subtle feminine movement, is acceptable, and it looks very graceful and very clean. If you don't necessarily need to have, more of the lines of that meat and potato kind of tree with, heavy taper and movement. There's something to be said for graceful trees, and, maybe for a newcomer in the hobby where they don't necessarily have accessibility to a lot of those older, nicer trees. Using younger stock like this can give you more, flexibility towards a forest design, which can mature to a very nice bonsai in the future. So that's definitely a good consideration, I think.
That's really well said.
It's kind of nice that the forest design lends itself to trees that are more accessible to beginners, but it's also a very natural design, because if you're growing in a forest, you're all competing for light, so everything does shoot straight up before they grow kind of fat.
Yeah.
I also like what Julian said too about, I think it was Andrew Robson, one of Michael's students. I don't remember how to say his Instagram handle, Ryuku Bonsai, but he does a lot of deciduous stuff.
Yeah.
And he got me super excited the other day, and I kind of got some younger, more very slight movement, more feminine style trunks, ginkgos and other things just to kind of mess around. And he had a Stewardia on there, and he was saying that kind of the older, back when bonsai was still kind of forming in Japan, if you look at the pictures, there is a lot more trees like that as well. And it takes a different type of appreciation and maybe a different mindset to really get the full value out of what you can with the trees. And I think they do have their own place, especially for beginners, which is kind of nice because you can do that. And they still will age nicely in a pot, after you get that initial movement while you can, I guess is what you need to do.
Okay, Julian, do you have any comments on the Korean fir that is also from Kevin?
Yeah. So as far as some options stylistically, so I'll just say what this tree has going for it, what it doesn't. You do have a very kind of movementless but thin trunk. So you have a few options to go about this. To some extent, maybe you can manipulate and bend the trunk. I don't know how necessarily pliable the wood of this species is, but if it tends to be on the softer side, that's one way to introduce some movement into it. If the wood tends to be very hard and stiff, when you do really big bends on the trunk, what tends to happen, you get really kind of wide, rainbow bowing in the trunk. It looks very contrived and not necessarily very aesthetically pleasing. So if that's the case, I would avoid trying to do bends on the trunk if you're unable to get visually interesting movement. Aside from that, since it is the more thin or graceful trunk, what you want to do is you want to get rid of heavier branches. You're going more towards that literati type feel. You need to establish an apex on it, which is probably can be done with one of these smaller side branches, and that that large shoot going up certainly can be reduced, and just go for a softer graceful feel. But aside from that, this is fairly raw material, so I guess there's a lot of options long-term stylistically depending on what you do with the tree.
Okay, Andy, you're up. So the next one is from Hector. A lot of people might know him. He's an administrator on the Bonsai America Facebook group. So what do you see as a pot combination for this tree, and how would you style this particular tree? And it looks like it's a Rocky Mountain juniper that has a little bit of the blue color in the foliage.
Yeah, that's a killer tree. I'm like, damn, I would like that in my collection. That's for sure. I think it'd be cool if we could all just like quickly just say what we think and maybe then discuss that. With this, I tend to like putting American trees in American pots, but I think that this would look nice in like some kind of Japanese unglazed pot as well. Maybe it has that little feminine. I would probably be like a rounded corner, not so sharp, and like maybe like a little bit like a strong, but like not too masculine. Maybe a little bit of curved in the corners, and maybe like a nice lip. Because I do like the small deadwood. I can't see if there's any other deadwood in the foliage, but it is like a very strong tree. I mean, you can just see even in the box, you're like, dang, that is like, it got some power. So I think like a rectangle would be nice. And then I think I would go unglazed, or, you know, you can go the complete opposite and go Dan style, and it'd probably look really sweet on some kind of more organic, like rock, maybe a rock or something like that with like a kind of some texture or something like that.
Yeah, especially at this angle, it looks like it's been so beaten down that a rock bring out a lot of like natural, like story of struggle kind of character to it. For some reason, the pot I'm imagining for this is like a blue color, like I don't know, like ocean blue maybe. It would kind of add to the color of the foliage almost.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm not an expert on pot selection though, so usually I go with whatever I have around that fits. That's my stage right now.
Yeah, at the museum where we have a lot of things in pots already, and we're kind of running lower on nicer pots. But I would like to hear what Julian has to say about that. I guess because I'm sure you see a lot of big junipers in Japan and have very nice pots with them too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I do agree a bit with what Andy said in terms of, this is a masculine tree, but you do have some, feminine and softer qualities with, the subtle wispy movement to the right. So I would say a soft cornered, rectangle would probably look quite good with a bit of lip. I think there's, potentially a lot of pots that could work. Best is just to see the pots, usually how when we pick a pot for the tree in the nursery, since we have, just tons of old pots, underneath the benches and in the storeroom, and we'll kind of, my oikata will assess the tree and and he'll look, okay, this is the rough size of the pot, the dimensions that will, accommodate this root ball and aesthetically look good. And then we'll go run through the nursery, see pots that meet that size criteria, and we'll do a test. We'll get a row of pots, we'll get the tree, and my boss isn't, he's not a man of many words, so he'll just kind of just point for you to switch the pot, and somebody will pick up the tree, we'll swap a pot underneath it, and kind of just visually check each one to see which one, bring the point of the pot is it should work in cohesion with the tree and the design, but ultimately what you're showcasing, is the bonsai. So you don't want necessarily something that's visually too strong to pull away from it. But yeah, I definitely, a soft rectangle I think would look pretty good.
Yeah, I think it kind of depends. Sorry, really quick, as like also your preference too. I know, like I said too, it's like it is for me. I do like generally putting like Japanese trees in Japanese pots and North American trees, but that's kind of my own stylistic preference. But so there is so many North American potters that are doing really cool stuff. And I think that would kind of come down. It would look super cool it looks super cool in a box to me. So I think it does, like Julian said, it has like a lot of potential to be in. I think, and it's, it's like bonsai it's always changing. So, maybe it'll be in a nice pot for a while, and then maybe a branch will die, or the direction will change more to the right or something of the overall canopy. And that could even change the style of the pot as well.
This is also an interesting tree because I feel like you could rotate it and have those deadwood branches going more straight up and kind of change the direction of the foliage, and it would still look like a pretty cool tree. This one has a lot.
Yeah.
But actually, I think since Hector submitted this tree, and from that time to when we actually got around to recording this, I think he has selected a pot. So I'll put up a picture of what he ended up doing.
Oh,
Yeah, I'm
cool.
curious to see.
That'd be interesting.
The next one is Mira, who sent in a wisteria. She said, this year it finally decided to bloom for the first time, and the bark is aging nicely. How do we increase back budding on the branch with older bark? Now, from this picture, it's kind of hard to make out which branch has the older bark that she's talking about. So maybe we could just talk about how would you increase back budding in general to give her more options if she doesn't like her branch options right now. I guess in my mind, I would just fertilize and let it grow for a year or two and see what happens. I have a wisteria in my yard that's a bit of a exploding ball of foliage right now. And that's just from me not pruning it for 2 or 3 years. So I got to get around to it. But that's one way, maybe. You could also prune hard and see if a bud emerges. I don't know. Do you guys have comments on how to get wisteria to back bud?
I don't have much experience with them, honestly. I just took a bunch of cuttings, so I'm to be continued for my experience with them.
Okay.
Unfortunately, I don't have much experience with wisteria either. But the general rule of thumb when you want to produce back budding is you allow, at least for deciduous trees, you allow the tree to gain vigor, for the runners to extend and grow strong. And after you've established that strength and extension, you cut them back, which then facilitate budding on older wood. So that's the general idea of getting back budding. As far as if there's some specific techniques with wisteria, I'm not too qualified to answer that.
Well, hopefully in the next year or two, she'll see some more options there. The next one is from Ivan, and I believe it's Julian's turn. He said, I recently acquired a Japanese black pine. Speaking of its age, my guess would be anywhere from 9 to 12 years old. Last year, it was repotted by its previous owner and put in not so well draining soil. This year, right after I got it, it was half bare rooted and put into a larger container with proper drainage. I used Boone's Mix as my substrate. What are my chances of getting anything good out of this tree? And what would be my next care steps? Thanks in advance. And so he has some pictures before and after his repot.
Okay, so for I guess in kind of developing and styling a lot of coniferous trees in general, you want to bring visually the best aspects of the tree, while hiding the aesthetically not as pleasing parts. For this tree in particular, you do have some nicer softer movement in the upper part of the trunk. But I'm not digging the lower part of the trunk too much, where it's very straight. It's hard to tell from the photo, but potentially if you rotate the tree, there could be a better trunk line that's a bit softer and graceful instead of kind of that harsh lower line in a chop, which then leads into the upper part of the trunk. That'll be something to explore, and in person you'd have to assess for yourself to see, is there a better trunk line that showcases more movement. As far as developing the tree, and this goes in line with what I talked about in the beginning, in that there's a stage of development for every tree. The trunk on this particular tree, it looks like it might be somewhat old, beginning to develop barking and whatnot. But it's gone, I would say, maybe like too quick into branch development. One thing you'd have to know is that once you start really developing and working on the branching, the rate the trunk thickens is going to be quite slow, and you're not necessarily going to be developing significant girth or taper into that. But going into that, if you know that and you're okay with it, it's fine. But if your intention is to kind of have a much larger and stronger trunk in the future, it's not very realistic if your focus is developing the branches. But saying you want to utilize as much as what's currently there, you're not thinking of any major developmental or design changes, I would say first find the softest and most graceful trunk line, which minimizes the straight part of the lower section, and if possible to obscure that kind of very angular chop in the midsection. And I would consider reducing potentially the lower branch a little bit, to kind of keep The branches, a little bit more in scale with the trunk, but long term you'll have a lot of options there.
Mm. So would you say if the bud emerges lower down on the trunk, maybe it would be good to grow it out as a sacrifice branch?
Yeah, that's certainly a possibility. If you wanted to increase some girth, that's definitely an option.
Looks like it's a decent start so far. Yeah. I think it's kind of interesting. The straight bottom trunk, I guess this is what you're getting at, Julian. It doesn't mirror the movement in the branches. So there's like some discord in the vision, in the appearance there.
Yeah, I would say so. Visually you want to be kind of consistent, with the movement in the trunk, the movement in the branches. You wouldn't want, say, for like a formal upright tree, you don't want a dead straight trunk, but in like extremely wavy, twisty branches. It'll look really contrived, and vice versa. So with bonsai, we want to make a convincing image. Everybody's going to have their different tastes, which is respectable and fine. But whichever way you go, you wanna create a convincing image for what your intention is. So trying to create elements that help complement each other and fit well with each other can kind of visually make a tree a lot stronger and a lot more interesting. Another kind of more brute force method would be to bend the trunk, and certainly there's people do a lot of heavy bending with conifers. That's another option, but it would kind of be up to the owner and kind of the vision they have.
Okay. The next, and actually the final tree for today's episode, is from Dendrocentric on Instagram. And he asks for Andy, how would you go about styling and improving ramification on this desert olive, which is Fistiera neo-mexicana? After purchasing this tree from Nursery stock, I did some initial pruning last year, and this year I've done just a little bit of wiring and pruning. The crown is a mess, and I'm not sure what direction to take it. I can't even decide which stem should be the dominant one. Obviously, I'm very new at this. Any and all advice is welcome. Thanks.
Well, just from this picture, I really don't have any experience with desert olive. We have some olives in the collection, but they're already styled, so I'll just do the maintenance job on them, which is a little bit easier than having to choose. But I was just seeing this. I mean, not being able to rotate it from this angle, I would choose I can't see where that lowest branch is. I can't see if it's going all the way across or where it's coming from. But I would do I'm kind of a dual, twin trunk, kind of or kind of a mother-daughter, but they're coming up a little bit higher. So kind of like a dual trunk, and I have two apices. You can I would probably reduce that left one just from this front of the picture. It maybe could change 100% from if you change it 180 or whatever. But from this picture, I would probably reduce the left side down a little bit more than half and start developing that a little bit more and shorten the right sides too. I think it's a little bit tall for the trunk size from what I can see in here. Mm-hmm. I don't really know what the desert olive looks like. I mean, I'm really one for naturalistic styling as well, so I don't really know what the desert olive's growth habits are, or honestly where they even. I'm guessing that'd be somewhere in Europe or something in the desert. I'm not really sure where. Do you guys know where those are from?
I'm guessing around Mexico, the southeastern.
Oh, Mexico's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I would probably try to look at trees from that environment and try to mimic some of those movements. And as Julian's saying, I don't know if they could be. I wouldn't really wire it. I think that olives. I don't know if they heal well from scarring or whatnot. But I would reduce. It's a little bit tall for the trunk size is my main thing. And I would try to it looks fairly healthy, fairly strong. So I feel like if you did some cutbacks at the right time of year for olive, which I also am not sure because I don't have one, you could probably get some back budding lower or get some stronger growth in those lower branches, which are very important, especially to preserve those lower branches is key.
Yeah, I had the same thought about making it kind of a twin trunk. I think a few months ago, I published something on the Puget Sound Bonsai Association's YouTube channel. It was a old video from like 2000, the year 2000. We had Colin Lewis come and do a demonstration on a twin trunk Japanese black pine. And from watching that old video to upload it, I learned a lot about the design of twin trunks. So I'll send that link to Dendrocentric, and I'll post it in the show description so you guys
I
can.
think that'd be good.
Yeah, it's definitely, it kind of lends itself naturally to twin trunks, since one dominant trunk is going straight up and then there's a thinner one kind of shooting off to the side looking for sunlight.
Yeah, and I guess I was talking about shortening too, and now I'm thinking about it. I mean, you could leave that right side taller. I mean, you can even go, I guess we have to kind of think a little bit even more wide. You can always do kind of a more Penjing-ish feel and do kind of, I feel like a lot of Penjing, at least in the collection here, is from Stanley Chin, and he has a lot of tall and narrow trees with more slender trunk lines. So I could see shortening that left side and then having that right side kind of be like kind of weirdly taller, and maybe having a different, more Penjing feel as well. That's just another idea, I guess.
Yeah, I feel like that tree would be a fun one to work on over the next
Yeah,
it's got a
I
lot
would
of
like to have an olive.
can you grow olives in DC? Do they grow well there?
We have an olive forest at the collection, and it's been there for quite some time, from Melba Tucker, who's from Julian's area over there, I'm pretty sure. And then we had a big olives that's in Chicago now, and they've done pretty well here.
Okay, that's good to know. That's all I got for trees from people this week. So thank you guys, you, Julian, and Andy, for humor this talk show. Don't know if or when we'll do it again, but I'll leave the link up on my website for people to submit more trees, and then we'll see what level of interest there is. I think a lot of people might be too shy to bring their trees to like a formal club workshop if they don't think that if they think that they're too new or something. So hopefully people will enjoy getting some styling advice via this format. Do you guys have
I enjoyed.
Yeah, it was fun.
Yeah, it was fun talking to you guys. Julie and I have been messaging for years, but we never actually met face to face or anything. So this is the closest we've.
This is face to face in this day and age now.
Yeah, as close as we're gonna get right now. Do you guys have any bonsai activities you're up to that you want to plug?
Go ahead, Julian.
I mean, not too much. Everything has been kind of on hold for me, because of the whole COVID situation. But hopefully, if things improve the next few months, I'll try to get more involved in the club scene, and I'm working with a few friends or customers, and hopefully can get the ball rolling there. But for the time being, not too much.
If people wanted to contact you for doing like a club demo or private work on their trees, how would they get in touch with you?
I mean, any of my social media is fine. Facebook, Instagram, my website. I have a contact page. You can leave a message or email to, which I read all of them. So any of those are fine, and I'll get back to you.
Okay, I'll leave the links in the description below the video. Yeah. What about you, Andy? Do you have any social media to plug or?
Not really. I'm unlike Julian. Like, I kind of have a different path in bonsai. I'm doing curatorship kind of path. So this is actually kind of cool for me because I see a lot of Sergio Kwan, Jack Sussick. They have Owen was doing study groups and at the Arboretum, and shout out to all those guys who have taught me a lot, and I got to see them. And this is kind of cool for me because I maintain developed trees. I'm doing more of the refinement work. I'm sure Julian is too in Japan, but as a bonsai professional, it's a little bit different. And for me, I guess I'm excited to watch Julian's career in bonsai continue in Japan, and then coming back. I would be very honored and excited for when you do come back and when you go back and then come back to travel to DC, and I'll show you around here, and it'd be fun to style a tree together. I think I was saying about collaboration, and I thought about it really hard a couple of weeks ago. And I think for me going forward with my own personal collection, I want to have more collaborative trees that mean something to me. I have a ponderosa pine with Jennifer Price that we did, and it means so much to me having my friends who are bonsai professionals supporting your guys' work as traveling professionals, and being able to have that piece of work as my in my own collection and to bring it further in age is really exciting from a curator standpoint. So that's kind of my future, and excited to meet you hopefully too, Ryan. You'll be closer to me, so get out to DC and come.
I'll be driving
and
distance.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, come out and visit and come to the collection. I'd be happy to show you around and hang out at my place. And
cool. I've actually never been to the National Penjing Museum before, or Bonsai and Penjing Museum. So I'll definitely have to
come.
Are there any exhibits coming up for the museum that you can talk about, or are they all like top secret, classified?
No exhibits right now because we don't even know when we're going to open, and I deflowered all the azaleas before they even flowered, just to like debudded all of them just to get them stronger. And it's kind of been a silver lining. You know, everything is just growing out, and we're able to let it grow out, because that's a challenge in a collection where we have so many trees on display is balancing, you know, that strong energy and keeping it presentable to a certain extent. We do let things get a little bit shaggy to try to, but also presentable. But now it's like, man, we're just letting things get crazy, letting lower branches get super strong, and, you know, trying to continue the work of people like, you know, that Julian is following in their steps and, you know, footsteps, and these artists made amazing things, and I want to be able to keep them alive and growing. So this is good. Coronavirus is good for the health of the trees there, that's for sure.
Yeah. let them have a break from being pruned all the time, I guess. It's kind of a cycle of shagginess and then refinement and more shagginess and more pruning. So yeah.
I know my collection wants me to be at work more. I think I'm overworking a couple of things, so I'm trying to stay away from them. I'm just trying to enjoy them without touching them at this point.
Remember what you said, a healthy dead tree better than, or a healthy tree.
Healthy unstyled tree
Better than a dead tree. Yeah. Okay. Cool. If anyone wants to find more of my work, I've got my bonsai blog, write2tree2.com, and I have a lot of stuff on there from Dan Robinson, and once I come out to Ohio, I'll probably work with some different artists out there, so we'll see what's in the future there. Yeah. Thanks for joining the call.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you for hosting it, Ryan.
See you guys later.
All right.
Later.
Bye-bye.
Today's episode has been recorded, produced, and edited by Kevin Ferris and Ryan Houston. Our music was provided by MIDI Cancer. To find more music from MIDI Cancer, check out their SoundCloud and Bandcamp pages. To find more information on the podcast, please check out our Instagram page, Bonsai Time Podcast, and our website, bonsaitimepodcast.com. To stay in touch with us, Kevin's Instagram is Kevin_Ferris, PNW, and Ryan's website is write2tree2.com. You can find these links in the description below. Thank you for listening, and bonsai on!